Welcome to This Day in His Story, created by American Heritage Worldwide, a reminder that every day holds something new to learn. Did you know that more than 3,000 people lost their lives and 250,000 people were left homeless during the 1906 San Francisco earthquake? Learn that over 28,000 buildings were destroyed by the earthquake, leaving survivors to live on the street and sleep in tents in city parks, while the U.S. Army built more than 5,600 small relief houses to help provide shelter. Discover that just 9 years later, the city of San Francisco surprised the world as it rose from the ashes to rebuild and become the host of the World's Fair Panama Pacific International Exposition. Imagine it is 5:11 a.m. You are fast asleep in your bed.
The safest place you could be, right?
Exactly. But in the next 58 seconds, the earth beneath your home doesn't just shake. It violently rips open for nearly 300 miles.
Bad.
Yeah, shifting your entire city several feet to the left. And the air just fills with this, deafening sound of shattering brick and snapping timber.
Screaming metal. I mean, it's...
Yeah. And the absolute worst part, that terrifying 58 seconds of shaking is, it's actually only the opening act.
Right, because it is the kind of event that just completely shatters our universal expectation of stability.
Totally.
We build our entire civilization on this, this premise that the ground beneath our feet is a fixed variable. So when that betrays you, well, everything else falls apart.
It really does. And today we are bringing you along for a deep dive into really one of the most staggering examples of that betrayal.
Yeah, the Great San Francisco earthquake.
Exactly. We've got this massive stack of sources detailing the event, but our mission today isn't just to gawk at the geological destruction.
Right, there's so much more to it.
There is. We are going to examine the incredible science that was born from the rubble, the brutal realities of survival, and the profound spiritual truths about how we actually piece ourselves back together.
Yeah, because this deep dive is fundamentally about transformation.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, it is about a city breaking apart, yes, but more importantly, it's about the literal and metaphorical mechanisms of how communities and individuals reconstruct their foundations.
Okay, let's unpack this, because before we get into the aftermath and the rebuilding, we have to establish the sheer terrifying scale of the initial event.
Right, we have to set the scene.
Yeah, we are talking about 58 seconds that quite literally reshaped the Earth.
Just 58 seconds.
Picture that timeline. April 18th, 1906, exactly 5:12 in the morning.
The time frame is actually the most crucial part to understand here. The shaking itself lasted for less than 1 single minute.
Which is nothing.
Right. In the grand scheme of a day, it's a blink. But in that microscopic window of time, the earthquake ruptured an astonishing 296 miles of the San Andreas Fault in California.
296 miles?
Yeah.
In under a minute. I mean, that is almost incomprehensible speed. The sources actually note that the land physically shook upward, starting from the northwest of San Juan Bautista.
Right, and rippling all the way up.
Yeah, all the way to the triple junction at Cape Mendocino. Now, hold on. For those of us who aren't, geologists, what exactly is a triple junction?
Well, it's a geological intersection. It's the spot where 3 massive tectonic plates meet.
Okay.
These are the massive slabs of rock that make up the Earth's crust, right? So they meet and they just grind against each other.
So which plates are we talking about here?
In this case, you have the Pacific Plate, the North American Plate, and the Juan de Fuca Plate.
Okay, wow. 3 of them.
Yeah, all interacting at once. And the text points out that the subduction of the Juan de Fuca Plate beneath the North American Plate is what created this incredible lateral tension that finally snapped.
Stop right there. Let's define subduction, because that sounds like some heavy geology jargon.
Fair enough. So imagine 2 massive continent-sized conveyor belts of rock slowly crashing into each other.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Because they can't occupy the same space, one of those belts is being forced deep underneath the other. It plunges down into the Earth's hot mantle.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that forced diving under that is subduction. And it builds up centuries of unimaginable grinding pressure.
Right. So instead of a trampoline just bouncing up and down, this wasn't vertical.
Exactly.
The horizontal displacement means it's like bending a thick wooden ruler. For decades, these plates are catching on each other, bending the Earth like that wood.
That's a great way to put it.
And the 1906 quake wasn't just a shake. It was the moment the ruler finally snapped and violently whipped back into place.
Right.
You're standing there, and suddenly the ground beneath you is several feet to the left of where it was a second ago.
It's terrifying. Every brick, every pipe, every foundation just shears apart.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating here is how this completely upended the scientific consensus of the era.
Really? How so?
Where this event completely surprised the geologists of the time. Up until then, the primary understanding of seismic events focused really heavily on vertical movement.
Like the ground just dropping or rising.
Exactly. But the massive horizontal displacement of 1906, it forced a complete rethinking of how the Earth actually moves.
But here's the thing that always gets me about this story.
What's that?
If the ruler snaps and the shaking is over in less than 60 seconds, why was the city left in a state of absolute ruin for weeks and months? I mean, it wasn't just the shaking, right? It was the second disaster.
The fires.
Yeah.
The initial tremors did something catastrophically specific. They completely destroyed the city's water lines beneath the streets. So when the friction of collapsing buildings and severed gas lines inevitably sparked fires all over the city, the firefighters were left completely powerless.
It's a terrifying irony. You have a disaster that destroys your infrastructure, and that very destruction prevents you from stopping the second disaster.
Right.
You have fire engines, you have hoses, you have brave men ready to fight, but you turn the valve and there is absolutely zero water.
None. And those fires ignited and roared for several days, consuming much of San Francisco.
It's just wild.
Yeah, it wasn't a localized fire. It was a sprawling firestorm that essentially ate the city alive.
The toll is, frankly, almost hard to process. I mean, we are looking at over 28,000 buildings completely destroyed.
28,000.
Over 3,000 people dead, making it the deadliest earthquake in United States history.
Yeah, the human cost was just staggering.
And 250,000 residents were suddenly left entirely homeless. The damages were estimated at $500 million. And remember, that is in 1906 currency.
Exactly. And the psychological toll of that overnight transition from, urban comfort to desperate wilderness survival within city limits, it's profound.
Oh, absolutely.
Survivors were forced to sleep in makeshift tents in city parks. They had to stand in these incredibly long, agonizing lines just for basic food rations.
And the sources point out this one detail that I find so incredibly jarring.
Oh, sure.
The survivors literally had to cook their food out in the middle of the street.
Oh, right.
They were doing this to minimize the threat of sparking even more fires among the tents and the rubble. It's just a complete inversion of normal life.
Completely backward.
The street, usually where the danger of traffic is, became the kitchen. The indoors, the very concept of a house, became a death trap.
Yeah, everything was turned inside out. So you have 250,000 people cooking on the cobblestones to avoid burning down what little is left.
It's hard to even picture.
And the immediate question for the government isn't just, well, how do we feed them? It's, where do we put them before disease sets in?
Right. So news of the disaster spread, and aid actually poured in from across the country and the entire world.
Yeah, there was this massive global mobilization.
The U.S. Army was brought in to establish order and build shelters. They constructed these relief houses out of redwood and fir.
They were basically San Francisco's original tiny homes.
Yeah, built specifically to get people out of those canvas tents.
And it was a monumental logistical effort by the military, coordinating materials and labor in a city that was still largely a smoldering ruin.
Right.
They managed to build over 5,600 of these redwood and fir relief houses.
Okay, hold on. Let me run these numbers for a second, because this is where the reality of the situation gets really grim.
Okay, let's hear it.
The sources state the Army built over 5,600 of these relief shacks. But we just established that there were 250,000 homeless residents.
Right.
Even if you managed to pack a family of 4 or 5 into each of those tiny redwood homes, 5,600 shacks only managed to shelter about a tenth of the displaced population.
Yeah, the math highlights a harsh historical truth.
It's awful.
The sheer scale of the disaster vastly outpaced the relief. Disaster relief, especially in the early 20th century, was just severe triage.
So what happened to the hundreds of thousands of people who didn't get a redwood shack? What does that tell us about the reality of the aftermath?
Well, it tells us that those who survived the 58 seconds of shaking and the days of fire faced weeks, months, and even years of profound difficulty and hardship.
Yeah.
Their lives were changed forever by the absolute inadequacy of available shelter. People had to leave the city entirely, moving across the bay or down the peninsula.
Communities were just completely fractured.
Exactly. The physical rebuilding of San Francisco took years, but the human displacement was immediate and largely unmitigated for the vast majority.
It is a staggering reality check on the limits of human intervention during a crisis. But, out of all that unimaginable destruction, the sheer helplessness of having no water and not enough shelter, there was a pivot,
Yes.
a shift that actually changed how we understand the Earth itself.
Right, because the immense scale of the San Francisco earthquake acted as a powerful, unavoidable catalyst for modern science.
It really did.
It essentially forced the evolution of seismology from a theoretical academic pursuit into an urgent practical necessity.
Let's trace that timeline, because we don't just want to list the inventions. We want to understand how they actually work.
Sure.
It actually starts a bit before the quake. In 1880, a scientist named John Milne invented the modern seismograph.
And the genius of Milne's seismograph was its simplicity.
How so?
Well, before this, we knew the Earth shook, obviously, but we couldn't accurately measure the strength or direction.
Right.
Milne used a heavy pendulum suspended over a piece of paper.
Oh, okay.
When the Earth shakes, the heavy pendulum naturally wants to stay perfectly still due to inertia, while the frame of the machine and the paper attached to it moves with the shaking Earth.
Ah, so it gave us a literal drawing of the seismic waves. But having a tool to measure an event doesn't mean you understand the mechanics causing the event. That's where the aftermath of the California earthquakes comes into play.
Right.
In 1911, an American geophysicist named Henry Reed developed the main model of the earthquake cycle.
And this is the elastic rebound theory.
Yeah, which brings us perfectly back to your analogy of the snapping wooden ruler.
Exactly. Reed used the data gathered to prove that faults store energy through elastic strain over long periods of time.
And then they violently release that energy when the friction is overcome.
Spot on. It is the exact same model that is still in use today to explain the mechanics of tectonic tension.
And then we jump forward to 1935 to Charles F. Richter of the California Institute of Technology.
Right, the Richter scale.
He develops the Richter scale. The sources describe it as a mathematical device used to determine the logarithm for the power of waves recorded by those seismographs. Now, logarithm is one of those math terms that sounds intimidating, but it just means the scale multiplies rather than adds.
Exactly. A 7.0 on the Richter scale isn't just one step worse than a 6.0.
Right. The shaking amplitude is 10 times greater, and it releases over 30 times more energy.
It gave the world a standardized language for seismic power. Milne gave us the pen to record the Earth's movements. Reed gave us the dictionary to understand the language.
And Richter gave us the mathematical grammar to measure its true volume.
Perfectly said.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting. We have this compounding series of breakthroughs, and the sources reveal a crucial historical fact that ties all these scientific minds together.
This part is fascinating.
Years later, Henry Reed, the guy who developed the earthquake cycle model in 1911, went back and studied the seismic data from the 1910 San Francisco earthquake.
Right.
And using these evolving tools, he discovered that the 1910 earthquake registered a whopping 7.9 on the Richter scale.
It is an incredible data point.
Wait, back up. 1910, the great quake we've been talking about, the one that destroyed the city, was 1906.
Yes, the 1906 quake is the famous one that initiated this massive wave of scientific inquiry.
Right.
But the sources explicitly state that Reed studied the seismic data from the 1910 San Francisco earthquake, a subsequent massive event, and determined it registered a 7.9.
That is wild. It just proves how terrifyingly active that fault line is.
Right, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, it shows how the scientific method operates across decades.
Yeah.
They were using data from the 1910 event, applying mathematical frameworks developed in the 1930s to retroactively understand the immense tectonic forces at play in California.
It's all connected.
It is a testament to how human beings respond to an unpredictable environment. We experience trauma, and our response is to innovate.
We ruthlessly map the danger so we can survive it next time.
Exactly.
We measure the Earth's rebuilding, but how do we measure our own?
That's the real question.
Because the rebuilding wasn't just scientific, and it wasn't just physical, it was deeply spiritual.
The architecture of personal growth and societal rebirth is just as important as the redwood relief houses or the seismographs.
Oh, for sure. Think about this timeline. The city is reduced to ashes in 1906. Over 250,000 people are displaced.
Right.
But the sources note that a mere 9 years later, in 1915, San Francisco completely surprised the world.
9 years.
It rose from the absolute ashes and destruction to become the host city of the Panama Pacific International Exposition, a full-blown World's Fair.
To go from cooking in the middle of the street to minimize fire risks, to hosting a glittering international showcase of progress and culture in less than a decade.
It's mind-blowing.
It is an almost unbelievable display of resilience. It proves that a community is not defined by its ruins, but by what it chooses to build on top of them.
And this translates directly from the societal level to the deeply personal level.
Absolutely.
The sources we are diving into today offer some profound absolute truths about this process of reconstruction. They state plainly that each of us has times of trials in our lives.
We all do.
Trials are simply a natural part of life. We cannot avoid the earthquakes, whether they are literal tectonic shifts or, metaphorical disasters in our personal lives.
Right. But the crucial insight here is how we respond. The text teaches a powerful truth.
What's that?
While these trials are natural, they can be actively lessened through righteous living.
Righteous living. The reality that the integrity of our daily actions, our moral choices, and our spiritual grounding actually serve as a buffer against the devastation of life's trials.
Exactly. It doesn't stop the ground from shaking, but it keeps your personal foundation from completely crumbling.
That's powerful.
We learn from times of sadness, sickness, and heartache to grow and progress. The suffering isn't meaningless if we allow it to be an engine for our own evolution.
Yeah, just as the devastation of the city forced the evolution of seismology, our personal devastation forces the evolution of our character.
Spot on.
I want to turn this directly to you listening right now.
Yeah, let's bring it home.
The sources pose some very direct questions, and I think they are worth pausing for. In what ways have you grown stronger from a difficult time?
It's a great question.
Think about the fires in your own life. What have you learned from them? We strongly encourage you to take these thoughts and actually discuss them with a family member today.
Definitely.
Make it a conversation about your own resilience.
Because the act of discussing our trials and our growth helps solidify that foundation. It's how we build our own internal relief houses, ensuring that we are stronger for the next unexpected shift.
Exactly. Now, we can get incredibly philosophical about rebuilding our foundations and spiritual readiness, but let's take off the philosopher's hat for a second and put on a hard hat.
Sounds good.
The sources make a point to ground us back in physical reality, pointing to some very literal, practical tools.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what to actually do in an earthquake?
It is a question that requires a concrete, rehearsed answer. The ground can shift at any moment.
Right. And the sources urge you to take immediate action to be prepared. Specifically, they highlight a couple of crucial resources, even ones designed for kids.
Those are super important.
I want you to look up and watch these specific videos. There's one called Kids Earthquake Safety Disaster Dodgers, which is about a 3-minute watch.
Okay, easy.
And another called Kids Earthquake Safety Tips, which is a quick minute and a half. Even if you aren't a kid, the fundamental rules of dropping, covering, and holding on are universal life-saving mechanics.
Preparation is the physical manifestation of that righteous living we discussed.
Oh, I love that connection.
It is taking proactive, responsible steps to lessen the impact of natural trials.
So what does this all mean? We started this deep dive looking at a peaceful morning in 1906 that turned into a 58-second geological rupture.
Right, tearing open nearly 300 miles of the Earth.
We saw a city consumed by a secondary disaster of fire because the very infrastructure meant to protect it was destroyed.
Yeah, and we unpacked the brutal triage of disaster relief, where housing 250,000 displaced people meant 5,600 redwood shacks were barely a drop in the bucket.
But from that intense hardship, we traced the incredible scientific revolutions.
From understanding the heavy pendulum of Milne's seismograph to the snapping ruler of Reed's earthquake cycle model.
And to the revelation of the 1910 quake registering a 7.9 on Richter's logarithmic scale.
Exactly.
And finally, we saw the profound truth of righteous living. We saw a city rebuild itself for a World's Fair in just 9 years.
Proving the absolute truth that we learn from heartache to grow and progress.
Yeah.
All of this leaves us with one final essential thought to mull over.
What's that?
Well, if an entire city can be reduced to ashes and then host a glorious World's Fair a mere 9 years later.
Right.
And if our own personal trials are actively lessened by the righteousness of our actions, then perhaps we've been looking for stability in the wrong place.
Oh, I like where you're going with this.
Perhaps the most powerful, stable force on Earth isn't the tectonic plates beneath our feet.
Because those will always shift, subduct, and break.
Exactly. The true bedrock is the boundless human capacity for rapid reinvention. The ground will fail us, but our ability to rebuild doesn't have to.
Wow.
So the question we leave you with is this. What is your personal 1915 World's Fair waiting to be built from the ashes of a past trial?
The ground is going to shake regardless. The question is what you choose to build when the dust settles.
Perfectly said.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep learning, keep preparing, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us for this day in His story. May the lessons of yesterday inspire you to see God's hand today and to play your part in His story now. For more faith-based learning, visit ahsworldwide.org, the homeschool for faith and family.